Hi everyone and welcome back to part 30. So in this video we are going to see how we can basically send friend request. Okay, we have already implemented this feature. We are just going to basically demonstrate it. Then we'll be moving on to this part where we'll learn how we can basically render a list of conversation. Okay, like after sending a friend request, okay, you can see it is saying friend request sent successfully. I have another tab open where I have the second user, okay, to which I have sent the friend request. Now if I open up this request tab here, then you can see I have received this friend request from user 1, and if I click on accept request, okay, then you can see it is saying friend request accepted, and here also it's saying friend request accepted. Now if you open up your friends tab, okay, then let's actually see. So if you again open up your friends tab, you can see here we are seeing that user 1 is our friend now, and here you can see user 2 is our friend now. Okay, so for just for testing purpose I have created these two users. Okay, now if I just click on this start conversation button, okay, then let's see what is going to happen. Okay, so as soon as I clicked on that button, you can see we have this user 2 here. Okay, a conversation has been initiated and a proper window has been loaded here. Okay, and this data is going to be coming from our messages array that we created in our schema. Okay, for now it's just the dummy data that we have already created, but you can see that we are able to basically start a conversation. Okay, so this is what we are going to implement in this video. So let's now get started quickly. Now, in order to basically fetch the list of all the conversations, okay, like let's say I have initiated some conversation, okay, with few of my friends, and then I log out of this application, okay, and then in the future, if I come back, okay, then what is going to happen? We'll be fetching a list of all the chats or all the conversations that we have had, okay, and we'll be displaying them here. And this is not going to be done via a fetch request, okay, normal http request. We'll be basically implementing a socket event listener and emitter for this as well. Okay, so for this, first of all, I'm just going to open up my backend, okay, and then here let's move inside our server.js file. Okay, now you can see here we are going to basically implement another socket listener. Okay, so here I'll just write socket.on. Then we are now going to basically emit an event with the name of get direct conversations from our front end. Okay, so you can visualize it like this. When this list is going to be basically displayed, or this component is going to be rendered onto our screen, then we'll be basically emitting a socket event, okay, with this name get direct conversation, right? And here we'll be basically getting this data here. Okay, and in place of data we'll be basically sending an object containing this property user id. Okay, I'll explain it to you in more detail, and after that we'll also get a callback from our front end. I'll explain it to you how this callback is going to work shortly. So for now, we have just created this asynchronous function in where in the first place we are getting all of the payload that we have basically emitted from our client side. Okay, and in this case we are just going to send the user ID, okay, the user which is currently logged into our application, and then there will also be a callback. Okay, then inside the body of this function, what we are basically going to write, we are going to basically get all of the existing conversations that this user with this particular id has done in the past. Okay, so let's actually do that. So we'll be basically writing a mongodb query here. Let's see how we can do that. So I'm just going to write const existing conversations. Okay, and then we can just do a query, and we are going to perform this query on this model one-to-one message. Okay, because for each one-to-one message that is going to happen inside this application, there will be a particular record, you can say, okay, with this schema. Okay, so that is why we are going to perform a find query on this model one-to-one message. So I'm just auto importing it from my models folder slash one-to-one message.js. Okay, then we can simply write a query on it. Okay, and I'll be running this find query, which is basically going to give us a list of all the records that satisfy our filtering criteria. Okay, now we'll have to basically provide a filtering criteria here. Okay, and what we basically want is, let's say I am user a, okay, and I am doing this, or I am emitting this event from my client application. Okay, then this will be my user id. Okay, now in order to fetch all of the one-to-one conversations that I have had, we'll have to see all the documents, or we'll have to fetch all the documents in which this participants array has my id. Okay, now how we can basically write that in terms of a MongoDB query, let's see that. Okay, so here we'll be writing participants. Okay, just make sure that you don't do any typo mistake here. Okay, so participants, then what we basically want is, let me actually write the query, then it will be much more easier to explain to you. Okay, so what we have basically written here, we are checking this participants field, okay, which is basically an array. Okay, and we are saying that I am providing you with a list, okay, with just one element, and that participants list, okay, must have this element inside that. Okay, that means I am searching for all of the records in which I am a participant in a direct chat. Okay, so that is basically going to give us the list of all the one-to-one conversations that I have had. And also you can see that here we have defined that this participants field is going to be an array with just object IDs. Okay, this is not going to be the actual user's document. Okay, so what we'll have to do, we'll have to basically call this populate method here. Okay, so we can just basically chain this after this find. Okay, and here we'll have to basically provide the name of the field that we want to populate. Okay, since we have already defined the reference here, so MongoDB will be able to basically check that yes, there is a user with this particular ID in our database. Okay, and in place of returning that user's ID, it will be returning the actual user's document. Okay, so I'm just going to say that I want to populate this field participants here. Okay, and please also note that in our users schema we have defined multiple properties. Let's actually see that. Okay, so we have so many properties here, but I don't want to get all of these properties. Okay, I'm just going to require just a few of these, like first name, last name, the user's email, okay, and their online and offline status. So I'll be basically restricting the fields, or basically selecting the fields that I want to get here. So here you can do it like this, just in a separate string you can write it like this. Okay, first name, I also want last name. Okay, and I'll also need the underscore id, user's email, and their status. This status is going to be whether the user is online or offline. Okay, we discussed this in the last video. So you can basically see what this query is going to return by just console logging this existing conversations. Okay, this is going to be a list. Now the last step that we will be doing here is to just make use of this callback that we will be receiving from our client side. Okay, this is going to be a function. Okay, and we can basically call it and pass some argument to it. So here as an argument I'll be giving it this existing conversations, that means a list of all the conversations that this user has done. Okay, now the next step is to basically set up an event emitter for this. Okay, and then we'll also see how this callback is going to work. So let's see that now. So now the next thing you can do is to basically open up your client side application. Okay, and then as you can see I have collapsed all of my open editors and my files and folders. Then we'll be moving inside the source directory. Okay, and then let's move inside this pages and dashboard folder. Then you can just go to your general app. Okay, and then you can see that we have this chats component. Okay, and this chats component is basically what is responsible for rendering this list here. Okay, so I'm just going to go inside this chats component. Okay, because we'll have to basically make use of use effect hook inside this chats. Okay, now what I really want here is that when this component is loaded, okay, or you can say rendered for the first time, then we want to basically emit an event from here. Okay, so that is why I'm going to make use of this hook use effect. Okay, this is going to come from our React library. Then we can basically pass a callback here like this, and then as a second argument we can provide a dependency list. Okay, since we want to run whatever logic we are going to write here only once, okay, like when the component is rendered for the first time, so that is why I'm going to leave this dependency array empty. Okay, then what we basically want is, we'll be first of all requiring this socket instance here. Okay, so as you can see we have imported this socket instance now. Okay, then we can simply call emit method on this, and as we have just implemented this get direct conversation, okay, we are just going to take the name of that event and paste it here. or let's actually change it to get direct conversations, because this is not going to be a single conversation, rather it's going to be a list of conversations. Okay, then as you can see here again, as a payload we are going to basically pass the user's id. This is the id of the user which is currently logged into our application. Okay, so here we can basically do it like this. Okay, we can simply pass payload, okay, in this way. And as a third argument, as you can see, we are going to pass a callback. Okay, so that is why we'll have to define some kind of function over here, okay, which is going to be executed when we are basically calling this here, like callback and then passing some arguments. So what is basically going to happen, this is going to be our callback function, as you can see. Okay, so this is what this callback is referring to. Okay, and when we are basically calling this, we are simply calling this function, and the data here is going to be whatever we are passing inside this callback on our backend. Okay, that means this existing conversation. So in short, this data, okay, this is going to be the list of existing conversations. Okay, so here I'm just going to leave a comment for that, that this data, this is going to be the list of conversations, right? Now let's actually fix this user underscore id. Okay, and as you already know, in the previous videos we have made use of it several times. Okay, this is going to come from our local storage. Okay, so here I'm just going to write window dot local storage, okay, dot get item, and then here user underscore id, like this. Okay, so now we have set it up our event emitter. Okay, then the next thing will be to basically dispatch an action from here. Okay, because after we get a list of all the conversations, we'll have to store it somewhere. Okay, so that it can be accessed globally inside our application. So in order to do that, we'll be basically creating a new slice with the name of conversation. Okay, and we'll be storing this list of conversation, or you can say data, that we are getting inside there. Okay, so let's see how we can do that. Okay, so let's now see how we can basically build our conversation slice. So the first step is to go inside our Redux folder. Okay, then move inside the slices, and then we are going to simply create a new file here, and I'm just going to call it conversation.js. Okay, like this. Now, once inside here, the first thing that you can see from our other slices that we have created, we'll be needing this create slice method from Redux toolkit. Okay, so I'm just going to basically import that here like this. And then after that, we'll have to first of all define our initial state, okay, in order to basically create a slice. So let's actually do that. Initial state, okay, like this. And here we'll have to define whatever properties that we want to store inside this slice. Okay, now we are basically going to do it like this. We'll be defining these two properties at the top level. The first one is going to be direct chat. Okay, and this is again going to be an object containing many different properties. Then there is also going to be another property called group chat. Okay, and similarly this is also going to contain its own properties. Okay, now the question here is, what are we going to basically store inside this direct chat? Okay, for now we are just going to focus on this direct chat. Okay, so let's talk about this. So the first thing that we are doing here is to store a list of conversations. Okay, so as we have just seen, what we basically want is to render a list here. Okay, and that is going to be a list of conversations. Okay, so we'll be basically storing that here. Okay, like this. And initially this is going to be just an empty array. Then we'll also be basically storing the current conversation here. Okay, and the current conversation, this is going to be an object. Okay, but in the initial state this is going to be null. Then for any conversation there will be a list of messages, okay, that will be rendered on the right side. So for that we will be basically maintaining this property current messages, and initially this is going to be just an empty list here like this. Then in order to basically create a slice, we can just simply use this method create slice. Okay, so I'm just going to write here it like this, on slice is equal to create slice. Okay, and then we'll just have to call this create slice and pass some configuration. So the first thing that we'll have to do is to give it a name. So I'm just going to call it conversation. Okay, and then we'll be basically giving it an initial state, and then we'll also be defining reducers here. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do here is to define a reducer for fetching a list of direct conversations. So I'll write it like this: fetch direct conversations. Okay, and then as usual we'll be getting state and action here. Okay, we'll be basically updating our state dot direct chat dot conversations. Okay, and we'll have to basically provide a list here. Okay, so how we can basically do that? So we'll be first of all getting our list. Okay, here like this: const list is equal to action dot payload and then conversations. Okay, and what I'm going to do, I'll be mapping over it. Okay, since this is going to be a list, and for each element, okay, I'll be first of all getting this user. Okay, so what is actually going to happen, as you can see in our backend, for each conversation, okay, we'll be basically getting data in this format. Okay, there will be an object, so there going to be a property called participants, which is going to be an array containing two more objects. Okay, and each object is going to have their underscore id property, first name, last name, okay, status, as we have defined here. Okay, as you can see, we'll be having these properties inside the participants value. Okay, so that is why we are doing this. Okay, we'll have to get our current user like this. So I'll just say el dot participants. Okay, and then I'll be basically, since this is again going to be a list, okay, participants is an array, so I'm just going to find one record out of it like this. Okay, we'll be getting each element one by one, so I'm just going to call it elm, or you can say element. Okay, then what I'll be doing, I'll be checking if the value of the underscore id, okay, after converting it into string format, so I'll be getting the underscore id property for each element, then I'll be converting that to string format, and then I'll check if that is equal to what we have in our local storage, okay, or not. So we are just going to, so how we can do that, we can simply again get it from our local storage like this. So I'll just write it here like const user id is equal to window dot local storage dot get item, and then pass the key name here, and that is user underscore id. Then we'll be basically returning an object from here. Okay, and how we are going to basically do that, as you can see, if you go to your data folder, okay, and open up your index.js file, then you can basically search for chat list here. Okay, and in order to display the fake data that we were displaying just a while back, we are using this chat list, okay, inside our component. So what we'll basically need here is, we'll have to basically convert our data into this format. Okay, like each conversation must have their id, okay, the image of the user to which we are communicating to, okay, the name of that user, message, okay, the last message that we have exchanged, the time at which the last message has been sent, okay, unread count, if the conversation is pinned or not, okay, and if the user is online or not. So we'll have to basically convert this list of conversations into that format. So that is why we are doing all of this. Okay, so what I'm going to do, the id for the conversation is going to be just el dot underscore id. Okay, then there is also going to be a property user underscore id. Okay, and that will be this underscore user dot underscore id. And let me again clear this up. Okay, why we are basically getting one of the two users that we had inside participants. Okay, because for each conversation we are also going to be a participant, and the other person that we are talking to is also a participant. Okay, but when we are displaying this list, okay, then we don't want to basically show our image or our name. We want to show the name and image of the user to which we are communicating. Okay, so that is why we are getting that user here, okay, from the list of participants, and then in place of the user id for that conversation, this user's id will be used. Okay, and the name will also be derived from this user. So I'm just going to write it like this. Okay, name, we can basically use first name and last name property to construct full name. Okay, so I'll write here this underscore user dot first name, and then we can also join this underscore user dot last name like this. Okay, similarly we can basically get the user's status Okay, so I'm just going to quickly write all of the other properties for now, okay, and then I'll explain it to you in one go. So here we have the user's online status, okay. So if the user is currently online, then how we are basically going to get that? We can just check if the value of this status property is equal to online, then that means the user is online, otherwise user is offline, okay. Then in order to get the user's image, currently we are not basically storing the image of the user on our database, okay, that means their URL. So we'll have to basically get some fake image for now, okay, like we were doing earlier. So I'll just import this faker library again. Okay, so you can get it like this. Please make sure that when you are importing it, this f in faker is a small, okay, don't import this one, use this, okay. And then since we are not actually having any of the messages right now, okay, the messages list is going to be empty. As you can see in our one-to-one messages schema, we have this messages list, but this is going to be empty for now because we haven't exchanged any message as of now, okay. So that is why again I'm going to use a fake message for now, okay. Otherwise we can simply display a text like this. Otherwise we can simply display text like this is the start of your conversation or something like that, okay, if we don't have any last message. Similarly, if we haven't sent any message yet, okay, then this time value is not going to be there. That means we haven't done any conversation yet, okay, so that is why there is not going to be any timestamp at which last message was sent, okay. Similarly, the unread count is going to be 0, okay, and by default any chat is not going to be pinned. So now we have this processed list, and so we can finally store it inside this conversations, okay. So this is our first reducer for fetching direct conversations list, okay. Let's now also actually export this slice from here, okay, and after that we'll be basically able to use it inside our combined reducers file. So I'll just say export default, okay, and then slice dot reducer like this, okay. Then first thing that I'm going to do is to save this file here, and then I'll go inside this root reducer. Once here, I'm just going to edit in this list of combined reducers here like this. I'll just write conversation and then here conversation reducer. So for now I'm just going to import it as with the name of conversation from slices slash conversation file, okay. And then I'm going to basically rename it to conversation reducer, and the same thing here. Now you can basically save your root reducer file, okay. And then after that we can finally create an action for this fetch direct conversations, okay. So I'm going to do that here. So as you already know, we have done this many times, so let me actually walk you through this, okay, again. So here I'll just say fetch direct conversations, okay. I'll just keep this f capital, and then we'll be basically getting arguments here, okay. So I'll just write conversations here like this, okay. Basically what I have done is we'll be getting an object and we have just destructured the property here. Then again I'm going to basically return another function here, okay, and we can basically get our dispatch and get state here as an argument as usual. Then we can simply call this dispatch, okay, and pass slice dot actions and then fetch direct conversations like this, okay. Then we can simply pass the payload to this reducer, okay. This is the list that we'll be getting here. So I'm just going to write it here like this, conversations, simply, okay. Then what is going to happen after this reducer is called, okay, then we'll be getting this list of conversations here like this action dot payload dot conversations. Then you can see we are mapping over it, and then we are returning this processed object, you can say, okay, for each element that we have inside this conversation. And then we'll be getting a final or a processed list, okay, and we are simply storing that in our direct chat dot conversations, okay. So now I'm just going to save this list here, and then what we are going to simply do here is we'll be basically going back to our chats.js file, okay. Then if you scroll down, okay, then you will be able to see that we are basically making use of chat list here in order to render two kinds of list. First one is pin and the second one is all chats. For now I'm just going to comment out this pin section, okay. and then we'll be focusing only upon this all chats. Now here, instead of using this fake list, okay, we are going to use the actual data from our Redux. Okay, so for that, first of all, we'll have to basically implement use selector here at the top. So I'm just going to scroll to the top of this component, and then I'll just say const conversations is equal to use selector. Okay, let's import use selector from React Redux, as you can see on this line 28. Okay, and after that, inside this callback, we'll be getting our state. So I can just say state dot conversation dot direct chat like this. Okay, since this direct chat, as you can see, we have defined inside our conversation. You can again go and take a look here, okay, in the initial state, and you can see that this direct chat is going to be an object containing this property conversations, which is going to be the final list that we want to render. So we are accessing it like this. Okay, as a result of this callback, we'll be getting an object, and from that object we are simply destructuring this property. Okay, now I'm just going to grab this here, okay, conversations, and then I'll be basically replacing this chat list with conversations. Okay, and since we have already made sure that all of the properties are in the old format, okay, that we are using inside that chat list, so we don't need to make any changes here. Okay, now you can basically save your app, okay, start your backend and then start your frontend, and then you will be able to basically see the list of all conversations that has been done previously. Okay, now the next question is how we are basically going to start a chat, okay, or start a conversation after the user clicks on this button. Okay, so let's actually see that how we are going to handle that one. Okay, so let's now see how we can basically implement something like this. When we click on this start conversation button, okay, or this chat icon button, okay, then let's actually set up event listener and emitter for this. Okay, so what we are basically going to do here is, first of all, we'll have to move to a client side application. Okay, then I'm just going to close all of my open editors, and then I'm also going to collapse all the files and folders. Then let's actually move inside the source folder, go to sections and main. Here you can see we created this friends component. Okay, and this is basically what's displaying that dialog box. Okay, and as you remember, we have this friends list here. Okay, if you just click on go to definition, we have this friends list, and this is the single friend component which is basically having that chat icon button. So if you just go to this friend component, okay, then here you can see we have this icon button, and last time we just left this comment here, okay, that will be starting a new conversation on the click of this button. Okay, or will be basically opening up the previous conversation if the user has already done any conversation with that user. Okay, what we are going to do now is we'll be first of all getting this socket instance, okay, and that is already imported inside this file, okay, as you can see here. So we can just directly use it. Then we'll be calling this emit method on it. Okay, then we'll first of all emit this event start conversation from here. Okay, and as a payload we'll be again passing two properties. Okay, let me actually explain it to you from our UI. So if you go back to our client side application and switch to this friends tab, so you can see we have the name of this user, will also have the access to their ID. So what we are going to basically do here is we'll be passing two things here. First of all, to whom we are basically trying to start a conversation with, and who is trying to start the conversation. So that will be our user ID. So I'll just write it like this. Okay, I hope that is very clear. Okay, so this underscore ID is actually we are getting it as a prop here, as you can see inside this friend component. Okay, so each friend that we have, we are basically having access to their underscore ID, that is the unique ID each of the user is going to have in our database. So we are basically passing that from here, and we are also going to send our own user ID. Okay, so again we'll be basically getting our user ID here like this. Okay, since we have already used this inside user component, okay, so I don't want to basically rewrite this for every component. So what I'll be basically doing is I'll be just cutting it from there. Okay, and I'll just paste it here in the global scope. Okay, so now this is basically, this can be used by any of the components available inside this file. Okay, so now that is done. Okay, we have set it up our event emitter. Then the next thing is to basically set up an event listener on our backend and write the logic that we are going to perform over there. Okay, so let's now actually switch to our backend. Okay, then I'll be again moving inside my server.js file. Now right after this get direct conversations listener, I'll be setting up another listener here, and the name for this event is going to be start conversation, as you can see here. Then again we'll be getting some data here. Okay, so I'm just going to again write a callback here, this data. Okay, then we'll be basically doing some process on it. Okay, we'll be basically implementing some logic over here inside this. Let me also mark it as async because we are going to perform some asynchronous operation here. Okay, now let me actually first of all explain it to you step by step. So the data that we are getting is going to contain these two properties, to and from. Okay, as I just explained. So I'm just first of all going to get those two properties. Okay, like this, const to and from is equal to data. And then the first thing that we'll have to do here is we'll be checking if there is any existing conversation between these two users or not. So let me write that as a comment first of all. Okay, so what we are going to do, we'll be checking if there is any existing conversation between these users. Okay, so we'll be checking first of all this thing. Okay, and how we can do that, let me actually write it here like this, const existing conversation is equal to, and then we'll be basically doing a MongoDB query here. Okay, again on this one-to-one message model, because this is what is storing the list, or you can say each and every conversation in our database. Okay, so we are going to make a find query on it. Okay, and again this time also we are going to make that query on this using this participants field. Now what I want to basically search in this case is I want to get all of the records, okay, from this one-to-one message collection in which the participants are these two users, to and from. Okay, these to and from are going to be basically users id, as I just explained to you. Okay, so we are going to place a condition over here that i'm that I want to find all of the records inside this collection one-to-one message in which the value of participants, okay, this field contains only these two elements, to and from. And how we can basically write that in terms of MongoDB, let me show it to you. First of all, we'll use this size operator here, and we'll make sure that this participants has just two elements in it. Okay, then I'm going to actually use this in combination with this all operator. Okay, and here I'll just say that this participants field is going to have size 2 on, that means filter only those records which have only two elements in this field, and all those two elements must be either to or from. Okay, nothing else can be there. So this is how we are going to basically get all of the existing conversation between these two users. Okay, then after that we'll be again populating this participants field here, because this is going to be stored as a object id which is a reference to a user. Okay, so we'll have to call this populate method, and then we'll also have to provide the name of the field that we want to populate in this case. Again, I am going to just select few of the fields because I don't want to get access to every field. Okay, when while making this query, then we can basically simply console log the response that we are going to get here. Okay, so I'm just going to basically console log this existing conversation, and please keep this in mind that we are performing a find query. Okay, and this find query is going to return us a list. Okay, so that is why if there is any existing conversation, okay, then that is going to be the first element of this list. Okay, because there can be only one conversation between any two users in our application. So I'm just going to basically console log this out so that you can see it clearly. Okay, existing conversation. Okay, then we'll have to basically make a decision here. Okay, like if there is no existing conversation. Okay, if there is no existing conversation, let me just copy and paste that here, existing conversation. Okay, and then the other case can be if there is existing conversation. So what we'll have to do in the first case, okay, we'll have to basically create a new one-to-one message document. Okay, so let's actually write it here. So what I'll be doing, I'll just say existing conversation. Okay, and then dot length, since this is going to be a list, so that So that's why I'm using this length property here, and I'll be checking if the length of this array is 0. That means there is no conversation between these two users. Then we'll be basically creating a new one. Okay, so I'll just say let new chat is equal to, and then await one-to-one message dot create. While creating any new conversation, we just have to specify the participants, and those participants are going to be these two values, to and from. Okay, like this. Now after we get this new chat created, okay, what we can do is we basically want to again get the access to this newly created chat, okay, or this newly created conversation, but we also want to basically get this participants field populated, okay, and we also want to only select these fields. So in order to do that, we cannot actually chain that populate method after this create. Okay, so that is why we are going to make another query here. So I'll just say new chat is equal to await, okay, then one-to-one message dot find by id. Okay, now in this case the id for the document that we are basically trying to find is new chat, okay, dot underscore id, like this. Okay, and then we'll simply call populate method here. Okay, then inside that populate method again we are going to write the same thing, because we just want that participants field to be populated, and for each participant, or you can say each user, we just want these properties. Okay, like this. Then we can simply console log this new chat. Okay, and finally what we are basically going to do, we'll be calling this socket.emit, okay, which is basically going to emit an event, okay, to the socket from which we received this event. Okay, so we are basically sending a new event to that user, okay, who basically clicked on start conversation button. Okay, so here I'll just emit this event start chat, okay, because there was no previous chat. So we have this start chat, okay, and we are basically going to pass this new chat document that we just created as a payload here. Okay, then in the next case, if there is any existing conversation, okay, then we'll have to enter this else case in that case. And what we are simply going to do here is we'll just call socket.emit, okay, and then we'll say here open underscore chat. Okay, that means there is already a conversation that has happened between these two users. What we really want to do in this case is just open up that chat, okay, on the right side, and select that on the left menu as well. Okay, I hope you are getting my point. Like when I basically, let's say I have already started a conversation with user 2, okay, then I'm opening up this friends list and then clicking on this user 2, okay, like this start conversation. Then what is simply going to happen, I'll be basically switched to the new context, okay, where I'll basically see all of the conversation that I have done with user 2, and user 2 will be selected here automatically. Okay, so that is why we are going to emit this event open chat in that case. And what we'll be doing, since we have already confirmed that there is an existing conversation, okay, we can basically use this existing conversation and access the conversation using the first element in that list. Okay, so I'll be just writing it like this: existing conversation and the 0th element. Okay, so this is it. This is our event listener, okay, for this event which we are going to emit from our client side start conversation. Okay, so now we have basically set it up our event listener and emitter as well. Only the next thing left to do is to basically set up our event listener for this open chat and start chat on our client side. Okay, and basically use the data that we are sending from here in order to update our Redux store. Okay, and then we'll be basically done with creating this list of users, okay, or the list of conversation. Then the next thing we are going to do in our next video is to basically start sending our first text message. Okay, so we'll be basically able to exchange text message and media message as well. So I'll be explaining you how to basically create your AWS account, okay, and then we'll also be setting up our S3 bucket. So if you want, you can basically go ahead and create your AWS account, or you can also do that along with me in the next video. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked this video. Okay, then please make sure to press the thumb icon, okay, and also leave a comment down below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.